Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your lesson on simplifying fractions in our rational numbers unit. This is lesson 4.4 in the Glencoe Course 2 if you're following along with that. The target is I can use a common factor to write equivalent fractions in simplest form. New vocabulary in this one, and that will help us be able to describe what we're doing much easier, so make sure that you stay up to date with that. So just take a moment to think about what equivalent fractions and simplest form mean, because we're going to hear that a lot. So take a moment to think and have some vocabulary written down. What does it mean to be an equivalent fraction, and what does it mean to be in simplest form? So, equivalent fractions. When we hear the word equivalent, we think equal. Fractions are fractions. So, equivalent fractions are fractions that have the same value. For example, even if I just had, say for example, 2 over 2 is equal to 1, that's the same as if I had 10 over 10. Those are both equal to 1. More so though, you'll see it as an actual fraction number that's not one whole. So for example, if I had 4/5, that's the same as 8/10. Okay? So if those are equivalent, then what does simplest form mean? Well, simplest form means that the greatest common factor of the numerator and denominator is 1. That's what it means. When the fraction no longer can be simplified any further, it can't be reduced. So oftentimes you'll hear reduce the fraction. Then it's in simplest form. So for example, say we started with 8/10. Well, 8 and 10 share a common factor of 2. So their greatest common factor isn't 1, it's actually 2. And that simplifies to 4/5. So 4 and 5, they don't share any factors other than 1. So that 1 is the greatest common factor, so then we know it's simplified like that. So simplest form is when the greatest common factor of both the numerator and the denominator is 1. They don't share anything higher than that. So to write a fraction in simplest form, we have a couple methods that we can use to find that. So the first one is just dividing by common factors. So I write 6/24, and I just pick a common factor, any common factor that they share, to divide by. So I see that they're both even, so I might pick 2. And I see that then that's equal to 3/12. Well, 3/12 is not simplified yet because 3 and 12 also share a factor of 3. So then I'm simplified to 1/4. 1 and 4, whenever the numerator is 1, it's probably simplified. They share a common factor of 1, and that's the greatest, so it's simplified. To save yourself steps, you can divide once. If you divide by the greatest common factor, it should be simplified in one step. So to do that, you just have to know what your greatest common factor is. So for 6 and 24, we would list our factors. For 6, that's 1 and 6, 2 and 3. For 24, that's 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. So we look for our greatest common factor, which would be 6. So instead of dividing by 2 and 3, which 2 times 3 is 6, we can divide once by 6, and we'll be simplified right away to 1/4. So this way, if you know your greatest common factor, you'll get there a little faster. This way, you'll still get there. You just might have to do a couple more steps. So we're going to try another one. The numbers are a little bit larger. We're going to find the 36/45 in simplest form. So we're going to decide what are our common factors here. When the numbers are larger, you might not know. Some of you right now might recognize, hey, I know 9. Right away off the top of your head, 9 is a common factor. That's fine. If you want to double check to see if it's the greatest, then you can just list the factors or do the prime factorization. So that could be 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9. 45 is 1 and 45, 3 and 15, 5 and 9, and I didn't need all that space. So then you look to see, oh, my largest is 9, so I was right. But some people might have picked 3, some people might have started there, and that's fine too. So then I divide both by the greatest common factor, which is 9. 36 divided by 9 is 4. 45 divided by 9 is 5. So 36/45 is actually the same as 4/5. Why don't you give these a try, pause, and then come back and see how you did. So 7/24. I recognize that 7 is a prime number, so the only number 7 can be divided by is 7. And I know that 28 can be also be divided by 7. So notice I divide both the top and the bottom by the same number. I have to do the same number so that it remains equal. Because really 7 over 7 is like 1, and when you divide any number by 1, it should stay the same. So 7 divided by 7 is 1. 28 divided by 7 is 4. So 7/28 is equivalent to 1/4. 8 over 20. I could start with just 2. So let me show you both ways. So I automatically recognize 2. So I start there. And I get 4/10. Well, I recognize 2 again. So I divide both by 2 again. And I get 2/5. I could have gotten that right away had I divided right away by the greatest common factor, which is 4. I would have automatically got 2/5. So again, just depends on what you prefer, what you see right away. 27/36. I recognize that 9 is a factor of 27 and it's also a factor of 26. So I get 3/4. Yeah, some of you might have picked 3 right away and then divided by 3 again, and that's fine. I chose to use the greatest common factor. So a real world example of when simplifying fractions is going to be used, and this is true when you're using a calculator. Maybe Mr. Strye will have you do it in your science project. So Lauren measured a grasshopper on her science project. Each line on her ruler represents 1/16 of an inch. So your job is to find the length of the grasshopper in simplest form. So what you might notice is counting, if you know each one is 1/6, so I might look to see, oh, well, that means that the whole inch from here to here is 16 out of 16, and we have 2 less, so I see that the grasshopper is 14/16. Or I count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, yeah? And so that's the same as if I were to use maybe my factors. That's the same as 2 times 7 and 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. So if you're going to use those prime factorizations, well, if you do it that way, you can see that 2 over 2 simplifies to 1. So that goes away, and I just have 7 over 2 times 2 times 2, which is the same as 7 over 8. So notice that was the factor they shared. Really, it was like we just did dividing both of these by 2, and we still got the same thing. So just kind of showing that out with our product of primes here. So the grasshopper at 14 and 16 inches is the same as 7/8 of an inch in simplest form. So not so bad, ladies and gentlemen, just finding that greatest common factor and dividing both the numerator and denominator by the same number to make sure that it stays equal or equivalent. Hope you had a good time, wrote down some nice notes, and bring your questions to class. See you soon.